Beside the Sony creative styles, which change only the look of an image, the picture profile setting is more advanced and gives you more control. The first thing to know is that if you enable the picture profile, the camera will automatically disregard the creative style setting. There are 9 profiles to choose from, called PP1 to PP9. Be aware that each of them have its own default values, but you can change them however you want, even making them the same. So if you're copying someone else's settings, it doesn't matter which profile you are using. The first one, called PP1 or Movie, is the same as PP off with creative styles, set to standard. If you don't want to grade your footage, this is the best profile to use. However, it will not give you the film look that you might want. You can clearly see that the image is very saturated and contrasty, and for my own taste, the red is too strong. If you look at the scopes, we can confirm that. On the luminosity side, we can also see that with this profile we get super whites, so it still leaves some room for grading. This profile gives us around 11 stops of light, and if we bring down the super whites, we get 12 stops, which is not bad for straight out of the camera. The next profile, PP2 or Still, is the same as PP off in picture shooting mode. Compared to the previous profile, this one is a little less saturated and contrasty, with deeper blacks. The PP3 and PP4 are both set around Rec. 709 standard, but they are still over TV broadcast standard, so I don't know what's going on there. Compared to the PP1, the PP3 is less saturated and have brighter blacks, while on the other hand PP4 have similar saturation to PP1, but with some weird color shifting going on. I don't recommend using either of these two profiles. Next on the list are PP5 and PP6. These two profiles gives you more dynamic range and better grading capability. PP5 or Cine1 is a lot less contrasty and saturated compared to the standard profile. It nicely fits into the Rec. 709 standard and can be used straight out to the camera if you like the look, but it also gives you a more room for color grading. It has 11 stops of light, and if you bring down the super whites, you can increase that to 12. The similar situation is also with both Cine3 and Cine4, but I can't show you that because my camera doesn't have them. On the other hand, Cine2 has more saturation than Cine1, but less than standard profile. It also looks more flat because it clips around 100 IRE and has no super whites. This means that you can get more filmic look straight out of the camera, but you also have more color grading flexibility. The whites are much lower and blacks are a little higher. It also has around 12 stops, which is similar to Cine1 with lower super whites. If you want the flattest image possible on a Sony 8-bit camera, this is the best profile to use. Forget any log profiles, and here is why. The human eyes can see a little over 20 stops of dynamic range, while the Rec. 709 standard is limited to around 6 stops. While recording an image in a high contrast situation, we can either expose for the highlights or for the shadows. Modern cameras can capture around 11 stops in standard profiles and cramp them into 6, but if we use log profiles, we can capture somewhere around 13 to 15 stops. This way, we can achieve much wider dynamic range in our final image, but it will look very flat, thus requiring heavy color correction just to look normal. There are several potential problems with this approach. Nailing the right exposure can be hard when everything is gray. You will spend more time in post to color grade the footage. It requires a good understanding of color theory and light conditions. It's not recommended for low light scenarios, and certainly not with an 8-bit camera. The 8-bit format is a little problematic because it can only store 16 million colors. This sounds like a lot, but when everything is stored as a shades of gray, this simply isn't enough. Compare this to the 10-bit, which can store a little over 1 billion colors, and you will see the difference. These are all the reasons why the best picture profile on a Sony 8-bit cameras is Cine2. It gives you the best dynamic range and the most flexibility in post for grading, without any previously mentioned problems. So the final three profiles are log: PP7 S-Log2 with 14 dynamic stops, PP8 S-Log3 with S-Gamma3 Cine with 15 dynamic stops and a flatter image, and finally PP9 S-Log3 with S-Gamma3 with 15 dynamic stops and an even flatter image. If you want to utilize the full potential of your camera sensor and achieve the most dynamic range, you will probably use PP8 S-Log3. As I said, you will have more control in post at the expense of your free time. I also recommend using in-camera gamma assist while filming in log and learning to use zebras and histogram. Now, on some newer cameras there are two more profiles. The PP10 is HDR profile, which uses HLG gamma, and it's oriented to new high-definition rendering TV standard, otherwise known as Rec 2100. The final profile is PP11 S-Cinetone. This profile is created to mimic the popular look of Sony Venice cinema camera, but it serves one more purpose. S-Cinetone is perfect if you want to capture more dynamic range than standard picture profile, without any need for post-production color correction that is required while recording in low profiles. This is achieved by pulling down some of the highlights that would otherwise be lost with the standard picture profile. So it's basically what you see is what you get. This profile features soft colors, filmic contrast and natural skin tones as the most important aspect. Inside every picture profile there are many more options to tweak. The black levels change how deep the blacks are, and the values range from -15 to +15. Next option is black gamma, which allows you to alter the shape of the selected gamma curve and adjust gradation in dark parts of image. Knee sets the knee point and slope where the whites begin compressing to capture more dynamic range by adjusting the gamma curve. Color mode enables you to change and combine different color modes with different gammas. Next is saturation, followed by color phase and color depth. The first shifts color wheel, while the second adjusts the luminance for each color. The final option is detail, which is basically Sony's name for sharpness. If you want a more filmic look, try lowering it. Some people recommend using -7 and then adding some sharpness in post-production because it will look better. However, if you want a good image straight out of the camera, I recommend using values between 0 and -4, depending on your preference. Just experiment and use what looks best to you. You will also need to be aware that changing any of these settings, except for details, while using one of the log profiles can ruin the footage, so be careful and try them out before shooting something important. These settings can also make technical LUTs unusable. For those who are new to log, technical LUTs are used for transforming log footage to the Rec 709 standard. You can download them directly from camera manufacturer or use one of the many unofficial ones, such as Liming LUTs or Phantom LUTs. You also need to be aware that every LUT requires a different exposure, so always read manual beforehand. Lastly, always apply the technical LUT in the final node and then color grade the footage in the nodes before the LUT. For the end, on an 8-bit camera, I recommend using either Movie Profile for a finished look or Cine2 for more control in post. For a 10-bit camera, I recommend using S-Log3 instead of Cine2. If you have a newer camera, S-Cinetone is also a good option. If you want to learn more about Sony creative styles, which you can use with PP off, check my other video. And if you enjoyed this one, leave a like and I'll see you in the next one.